This is Mark Marcus with Infrastructure Guide, and today I have Charlie Marone with Opti9 Tech. And what they're doing is they're going to be part of our customer spotlight today. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hand this off to Charlie because Charlie's going to give us a little bit of information on who Opti9 Tech is and how they got started. Charlie, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, great to be with you today, Mark. Charlie Marone with Opti9 Technologies. I am the Director of Sales in the United States for Opti9, and looking forward to talking with you today.
Excellent. So, go ahead and give us an overview of Opti9. How did it come to start? When were you guys founded? Tell me a little bit about the back end, of the construction behind it, and who's the brains behind this outfit.
Yeah, great question and great starting point. So Opti9 as a company has only existed for just about 3 years now. It's the combination of a few organizations merging together. So interesting story, there was an organization out of New York called WebAir Technologies, and they had a private cloud infrastructure, numerous data centers throughout the world, and they were really focused on offsite backup and disaster recovery solutions delivered out of that infrastructure, as well as some infrastructure as a service and hosting production workloads in their SOC 2 compliant tier 3 um, rated data centers. They partnered with an organization out of the Midwest called Jellicose, and Jellicose was an AWS consulting partner. So really focused on AWS professional services, like lift and shift migrations into AWS, modernization efforts, and managed services for AWS environments. So those organizations merged together, along with an organization out of Canada called Hosted Biz, who did a lot of private cloud backup and disaster recovery. And together, those organizations formed Opti9 under the approach of being a hybrid cloud solutions provider, having solutions and skill sets around the public cloud hyperscalers such as AWS, as well as our own private cloud infrastructure across the globe that we can leverage for different workloads, primarily around backup and disaster recovery.
Okay, hybrid cloud. What does that mean for those who don't understand what it is, and how does Opti9 Tech play a big role in that? By the way, I went ahead and popped up your website.
So hybrid cloud to Opti9 essentially means that we have both a private cloud infrastructure as well as ties to AWS as a public cloud hyperscaler. We also partner with Wasabi as well, who's a growing hyperscaler in the market today. And really the thesis behind Opti9 as a whole was relatively simple. We noticed that most organizations were somewhere in the process of a cloud adoption or a cloud journey, but depending on the organization, they were at different points in that journey. And certain organizations decided to move all in with one of the hyperscalers like AWS or Azure or GCP. Others had said, no, we're going to remain on-prem or in a private cloud infrastructure outside of those hyperscalers. And others have a plan to eventually move to a majority of their workloads to one or the other environment, but it's not a one size fits all in many cases. Certain applications and certain organizations prefer to run in specific environments with different options and capabilities. And oftentimes it's a mix of both. It's not always necessarily a clean cut from on-prem to a hyperscaler or to a private cloud environment. So the hybrid cloud capabilities really give us the ability to meet that customer where they are in their cloud journey, help them with the assessment of what's the best infrastructure and ecosystem to invest long term in, and how can we incrementally progress through that journey to get you to that desired end state. And it can mean a lot of things for different organizations. So really focused on meeting where they are today and helping them in that process or that journey.
So I heard you mention AWS. Now, in addition to partner, let's say we worked with one of my clients happened to work with Opti9 and they were working with you, but what else kind of values would Opti9 bring to the table by partnering with other instances like Veeam, AWS, Azure? Do you guys work with Azure too?
Yeah, to a degree, absolutely.
Okay,
And
but
that's a great question.
yeah, go ahead and maybe emphasize on that a little bit because a lot of people are probably thinking about that. And I really want to make sure that we highlight that, working with you in the hybrid cloud, whether it's going to be private storage, and then there's also going to be some hosted in the cloud. Bring that up a little bit. Let's hear what you
Yeah,
got to say.
absolutely. So we partner with some great technology vendors or manufacturers. We're one of the largest Veeam cloud service providers in the world. Zerto is a platform we're very familiar with, Wasabi, AWS, and all of these technologies. We go very deep and wide into those. And really, the goal is relatively simple. It's to provide the enterprise level service and support for those various technologies. Let's take AWS. We're looking to provide an enterprise level AWS experience to the SMB mid market commercial organizations who don't necessarily have the budget or the bandwidth to go and do it themselves directly with some of those manufacturers, so to speak. Um, I recently heard our CTO give an analogy. You can go to Home Depot, for example, and purchase these technology solutions and build it yourself, or leverage a contractor like Opti9 who has the expertise and the skill set and the offerings to optimize your experience with those different technology platforms. And there's not necessarily a right or wrong answer. It's really working with that organization, understanding what the true priorities for that IT team is and what they should be. A lot of responsibility is falling on the IT team today, more so than ever. And it's finding out where their skill set and interest for the business is best aligned and offloading the rest to a partner like Opti9.
Great. So give me an example of some current situations or current applications you're working with some customers.
Yeah, absolutely. So, on the backup and disaster side, that's a real skill set for us. We're offering what we call IT resilience as a service. We also offer cloud backup as a service, disaster recovery as a service, essentially X as a service. And again, organizations have and can try to purchase the Veeam data protection software and build their own backup and disaster recovery solution and strategy. That requires building out a disaster recovery infrastructure that's far away from production to ensure it's protected against, let's say, a regional disaster, and managing that on a day-to-day basis. What we ask many of those organizations is that what's in the best interest for your team's time and resources to be put towards that, or should your team and prefer would your team prefer to focus on more core strategic initiatives, focus on the revenue generating applications while you offload the operational component of backup and disaster recovery to backup and disaster recovery experts like ourselves at Opti9.
So,
Another thing, oh, I'm sorry.
well, I was going to say, a big question is, what's the big, you're mentioning a lot between backup and disaster recovery. For those out there, what is the biggest misconception behind that? Because I know that is a big topic and a lot of people are throwing around the terms. And I don't think
Yeah.
100% they understand what they're really kind of getting into when they're talking about that. Can you just clarify that just a little bit more?
Yeah, that's a great question. And first off, we'll touch on just the IT resiliency approach that speaks to this.
Okay.
A lot of organizations are focused on cybersecurity, and I equate it to building that wall of their defenses higher and higher to prevent malicious attacks, ransomware attacks, unplanned outages of any kind. And that's a great method, and they should be doing that. But we look at the mindset of based on the ransomware trends in the last few years, consider yourself not a matter of if you're going to get successfully attacked, but when
When?
and what is your
Yep.
path to recovery. And that's where the difference between backup and disaster recovery come into place. Backup is designed for example, if you have to adhere to compliance and store data for a set amount of time. We were recently working with a hedge fund who had to adhere to an SEC regulation where they had to have data stored for 7+ years and 2+ years of that being immutable on immutable storage. And that's for restoring deleted data, for example, in more long term retention, archival retention initiatives, where disaster recovery is true recoverability. How quickly can you recover in a DR environment and have your users and your customers regain access from a business continuity standpoint? So that's where we're talking to customers about recovery time and point objectives. And oftentimes they don't have defined RTOs and RPOs. So we're working with them to understand what's the cost of downtime. If your applications are down for an hour, a day, a week, what is the cost to the business? And that'll help determine an appropriate recovery time and point objective that we should look to accomplish with a true, robust disaster recovery solution.
So let's say I'm a business. What's a good way for me to be able to measure the readiness and preparedness of like some sort of disaster, whether it's a natural disaster, whether it's a ransomware attack, whether it's a storm that comes by, or maybe power got cut off and my building's not going to get turned on for like the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's a great question. And quite simply, the answer is to test regularly and to test thoroughly. And this is where that misconception between, well, we have an offsite backup, we're good with DR, is really where you learn the difference. Um, it's possible to have backups offsite that you can recover within and from. However, you have to understand the expectations and the time associated with that, as well as the process. So we at Opti9, for example, with all of our DR as a service customers, twice a year, we're scheduling that disaster recovery test with them and on their behalf to ensure they test their systems regularly. And we don't do just a quick, ping test where they say, okay, the applications are online in that DR environment. Instead, we go further. We have their users actually log in, operate, and run out of that environment for a few days or weeks at a time. Make sure we document the process from A to Z. We provide a disaster recovery playbook or run book that we continually update with our customers and on their behalf so that when a DR scenario strikes, both us as the partner and the end user organization's IT team has a playbook of here's who's responsible for what, here's the sequence, here's the applications that matter most to the business. Not every server and virtual machine has the same impact to the business. So, for example, we want to make sure that those most mission critical applications are online and running much sooner. So that the real truth is to test fully, and test often.
Okay, so for instance, you mentioned hybrid cloud. So that way you mentioned kind of in a storage aspect of where you're kind of agnostic towards the storage, right? How how is that discussion with right now the hyperscalers? Because we know that's becoming a hot topic right now as far as, how do you approach someone wanting to try an AWS, let's say for a front end or a back end application?
Yeah, it's a great question, and oftentimes the best place to start is with a really thorough assessment. There's a lot of organizations out there who will tout, "Hey, in 2 weeks of working with us, we can give you a cost estimate, a TCO analysis." We prefer to go much deeper, anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks, and really thoroughly assess the business outcomes of a cloud migration to an AWS or an Azure or a GCP. We really try to make sure that there's a strong business justification. We're not trying to just sell a technology service or infrastructure or solution. We're really trying to tie it back to solving a complex business challenge or meeting a positive business outcome, and using that to drive the technology decisions on the back end, leveraging the technology to enhance and improve the business, as opposed to the other way around. So we're always starting with a detailed assessment and understanding that business justification, that business case, and letting that drive the future technology decisions on which solutions to use, whether a hyperscaler or a hybrid environment is best for you in that organization. No organization is the same, and the answer is rarely the same. So really working with them on a case by case basis to understand that business case is key.
Well, Charlie, this is all the time we have for today. I want to thank you again for jumping onto our customer spotlight and seeing what services and getting us to understand and know a little bit more about Opti9 Tech. I want to thank everybody for watching. I will talk to y'all soon. Thank you.